more than trying to be more rich, not to be rich, or actually to survive. So, if we sum up the history since 1992 and 2005, so 20 years, we basically have 11 facts. So let's just come back to those facts, mainly related to problems. Here's the first one. The world today has 7 billion people. But in 1992, there were more or less 5 billion people. And by 2050, we imagine that it's going to be 9 billion people. We actually don't have enough planets in order to give us enough income for security or to survive. Again, to sum up these stories since 20 years, 1 out of every 5 people, 1.4 billion people, are still living with less than 1.2 all of those, more than 60% of it, would be between India, Bangladesh, and China. What do we have? The third one. 1.5 billion people in the world don't have access to electricity. 30 years back, I remember, there were not electricity in all of the villages. So people don't understand why electricity is so important. I spent most of my PhD actually building toilets like in Darfur. So I guess that's to be like very true in Asia and as well in Africa. I remember as well some kind of debate that we got at that time in the refugee camp where we built those latrines and we tried to explain that those toilets back to the rock is actually with water. And for them to think that, wow, we can actually use so much water for that. And to try to explain to them that you still have to keep your 7 liters of water per day and nothing. So, again, that was one of the paradoxes that you come to when you're working in humanitarian aid. Almost 1 billion people go hungry every day, many again, Africa, Asia. And in terms of green gas emission, it still continues to rise. It's I don't see any change. So those are kind of summary of the 20 years. About 2.6 billion people live on less than $2 a day globally. So more and less, 40% of the world that's still be living with like almost nothing. But again, some of you might say, like, what does it mean to have those kind of dollar when people actually can live with $1 in those countries? It's about saving capacity. It's about how you're going to put all of your expenses. Definitely, the world is very complex. It's all different from one case to the other. Poor men and women participate in markets to meet their need for food, housing, services, as such as transport. Most of the development agency will think now about a new solution that is developing market for the poor. Market for the poor is the new kind of slogan that you have now when you're working for the Asian Development Bank or the World Bank. I don't know where is John. I know that he's going to say something after that. What is important for me is, so you have 20 years of practice, of people working in the field, people thinking about policy, people trying to help. For community, with the community, you got like mix of different type of policy making, implementation of program. But if I look at back Rio plus 20, where I got my disappointment was, hey, where are the lessons learned? What did we make not in the right way? And why do we still have like 2.6 billion people living as poor people? So, on those 20 years of practice and experience, where are the lessons learned? Well, if some of you have been reading the first draft of Rio plus 20, they are not as such reference of any lesson learned. We will get again to that point right after. Sustainable development. The only stuff that people will have been saying is that, well, the idea about sustainable development, the idea about environment, economic or finance, and social, all of those 3 pillars have a tension. Because it's very difficult to have this kind of balance between like economical growth, social cohesion, and environmental protection. And everyone will be okay about saying like, well, there is a tension into like the three main branches when we think about sustainable development. But no one will have the bravery, more or less, to think about a new concept. Maybe this concept 20 years back was not enough. Maybe it didn't integrate local resilience, local knowledge. Maybe it didn't integrate a part of what we know in Asia or in Africa as well. So, isn't this definition enough? And should we continue with that definition? Very few questioning were around that. And unfortunately, when you look at, again, Rio Plus 20, a lot is about the rights to energy. It's all about green businesses again. You know, like, you have the right to have your dam. Even if the dam is going, you know how we build the dam, right? You know that the community or the host community usually is going to lose most of the land. And we're going to have like a displacement. Not going to talk about the Chittagong tracks in Bangladesh. I'm not even going to talk about India and Bangladesh. I'm going to show you something more here. But there is a lot of conflict related to electricity. There is a lot of conflict related to energy. And at the end of the day, when you think about a Rio Plus 20, where the vision is still be remaining into we need to consume, we have the rights. There is nothing as such as the beauty behind it. And at the end, if the next 20 years still looks like that, I mean, I'm not sure I'm going like to think about a family and have baby, because I'm not going to add any pressure on that. So what you have in the framework of action, the kind of report out of the Rio Plus 20, you have this kind of very vague allusion that we need to provide new approach. We need to provide like sources of financing to developing countries, something new, something innovative. But what do we need to rethink? Well, and it's here where I would like to really make a case for maldevelopment. Not that, but I'm sure we all have been young and a child, and you remember we all learn from our mistake, right? Basic. We all learn from our mistake. So how is it not possible that any nation, any country right now are not capable to state all of the case of maldevelopment? At least we will be sure that we're not going to repeat our mistake. But we are incapable to do that. Why? Money behind, report from any kind of donor, you know, we like to use those kind of money, and that we have only like beautiful case studies where we can see that a poor woman have been on power. Yes, it's in terms of marketing, it's much more better. But in terms of reality, in terms of being practical for the policymaker, for the scholar, we need to be able to know what was wrong. We need to know what went wrong. And I think it's where we have to really rethink sustainable development. Sustainable development is as well about the bad example and the good example. And without thinking those two chains, we'll never be able to solve the problem. Another point as well is the bravery, again, and I'm sorry to use again being brave at that time. We have to think outside the box. I mean, there is a moment where we have to think where there is no guideline. We have to think where basically there is no knowledge yet in the book, because knowledge is kind of everywhere. And I will give you different examples right after about it. So let's all think about this. Let's bring together key perspectives from academia, policy, and practice, and defining maldevelopment. What is it? What is it not as well? Because those are very essential questioning. Scientists, decision maker, and practitioner currently have only a partial or simplified view on what constitutes maldevelopment. And I think that's really a shame of the last 20 years. And I really hope that the next 20 years, with maldevelopment and maladaptation, we will be able to reset a place and a true place for that. Because at the end of the day, it's coming to this very basic notion, the first do not harm. And I'm not going to come again about this ethical point. So let's think about different questioning. And I know that some already think about different questions for after, but I'm going to ask you some couple of questions. what makes society a developed one? Again, anyone have an answer, a response? Please take the floor for you. Which processes are irreversible and should be avoided as they reduce society room for maneuver? Again, whoever. Which values should be promoted through development and who should be held accountable? Again, what type of new value? Or is it the old value that we have, like the right one? When we think about a world where we have like so many different religions, where we have so many different type of people, well, is it the Western value like enough in order to understand sustainable development in a global way? And perhaps most important one, which policy and program that initially aim to ensure sustainable development are actually having a negative impact? And I'm sure that many of you have like many examples about different programs that went extremely wrong. But when you look at reports, when you look at like even like in the media, you have very few examples on it. It's very difficult to have an archive of it or documentation on that. So we basically do have different questions, and again, like if you have the response into it, please feel free, and I am in my place. But when I was talking first about this noble lives, I don't know how many of you are used about political science or philosophy and all. But noble lives is not something new at all. Let's state back Plato, Socrates, years before Jesus Christ. But noble lies is more or less like your parents. When they're saying something, just to be sure that you're going to do the right thing. And it's basically what is happening when we think about green business or having a new vision. So in politics, a noble lies refer to a myth told usually by an elite to maintain social harmony or to advance an agenda. Let's just think about that. So who is actually the elite right now that is putting on the agenda green businesses? Who is having right now the technicity or the capacity when we are thinking about energy? I'm going to ask that again. More or less, what we have with Noble Lives, and again, we think about green business, new vision, and all of those. It has this role about uniting, guiding towards a common goal. But is it the common goal of all of the society right now, on the 21st century, to have electricity? Is it really that, the primary need, when we are in Bangladesh, for example, where like half of the country is under flood every year? Is it really electricity the main will or the main priority? I'm not sure about it. Not going to get more into that, but I think there is a very good movie that have been produced by BBC and Adam Curtis that you might know, The Power of Nightmare. If you didn't watch that yet, please go and watch that. Why is it that so important? Because we're talking about a society where we are all run by faith and fear, because we are not capable to actually look at what is reality. But this fear was not because human being is weak, but just because we didn't know anymore how to think those problems. And maybe it's really coming back again about the epistemology, how to think those problems. What are the new questions that we have to ask to ourselves? And basically that. I mean, we have to think outside the box. Well, just right here is written why don't you open your square head first? Well, it's basically that. If we're not capable to listen first, we're never going to be able to conceive or articulate anything that will be relevant at the field level, at the local level, at the national level, and not even thinking in the global way. So we need a revolution or a reform in terms of knowledge, because right now we are in a information-based society, but we need to get back to what is knowledge and how is knowledge acquired. Let me take you like 2 examples. And the first one is about YouTube. Okay, some of you have children, maybe. Some of you have niece or nephew. 10 years back, when I was still like growing and all of those, I didn't know about those kind of phone and that I would be a slave about those phones. Everything like went very quickly for me. But even for my niece, when I asked her like, hey, so what did you learn today at school? The only answer, the only response that she can give it to me was like, well, on YouTube it was, pardon me, like I'm just asking you, what did you learn today? No, on YouTube. And I was really like, oh, there is something that I need to learn about YouTube that I'm not considering. So let's just look at back. If we're taking June 4 months ago and we're typing Rio plus 20 on YouTube. That. Well, the most viewed video about Rio plus 20 was actually this little girl who was 17 years old, Brittany. And let's listen very quickly like her speech.
Thank you, Secretary General and leaders, for the opportunity to address this plenary. Tēnā koutou from New Zealand. My name is Brittany Trilford. I'm 17 years old. I'm a child. Today, in this moment, I'm all children. Your children. The world's 3 billion children. Think of me as half the world. I stand here with fire in my heart. I'm confused and angry at the state of the world. And I want us to work together now to change this. We are here today to solve the problems that we have caused as a collective, to ensure...
I'm just going to cut her and just focus about this number. More or less 59,000 people have been looking to that. I hope that you're going to watch that. But 59,000, same time as Rio plus 20, June. Let's look at back then the top 5 most viewed video on YouTube. And it's going to be sad. Seriously, it's going to be sad. Extremely sad.
Our first video is called How Not to Land a Plane. Whoa! But that was a good trick. I'd like to see a 747 do that. I gotta say, though, this is probably the most graceful plane crash I've ever seen. And you know what upsets me the most about this video?
Separate pieces. No matter how hard they try, they'll only be left with 2 pieces. Place 2 batteries or corks between your thumbs and fingers like this. Now, simply place your hands together, placing your thumbs and fingers on the end of the batteries or corks and remove them. It looks really simple, but when your friends try it, they'll find they're trapped every time. The secret is to place your right thumb.
Один из лучших футболистов в мировой истории. Потерял мяч Сандро на чужой половине поля. И посмотрите, Лионель Месси, находясь между 2 защитниками, не стал дожидаться как раз, пока они сблизятся. И вот как должен был действовать Неймар. Как только мяч получил, подработал себе под удобную ногу и бей. Вот она, образцово-показательная атака.
This game sucks. Give it to a Luigi. Oh, Mario? Oh my goodness!
나의 모든 걸 사로잡은 에너지 그 눈빛 속에 강렬한 레이저 눈만
But Korean music is very important, as you can imagine. But what is the point behind like showing YouTube? Well, it's not for us to be all sad about what is the interest right now in the world when we think about June 2012, and that many of the youth, or even the adults, will not even like think about Rio Plus 20 as such, but maybe about Korean music, pop music. We will still continue like this. This cartoon will always be repeated, as the previous one that I showed to you as well. And at the end of the day, that's extremely sad, because that is not the interest right now of the world. So, at what moment our way of thinking sustainable development have been way too far for people to be able to understand that and to participate to that? At what moment did we get that shift? A second example that I'm taking is, I'm sure that at least one person here knows well about Bangladesh, but Bangladesh, between 28% of the country to 68% of the country is underwater for more or less 3 to 4 months every year. That's Bangladesh. What you know about Bangladesh, most of you, is about a country that is extremely poor, right? 33% of the population is living with less than $1 a day. 10% of it with less than 50 cents a day. We are one of the most densely populated country in the world, 1,000 person per square kilometer. We have in our only one city 16 million people. So yeah, we all know about that. What we know about Bangladesh again is poverty, it's like victim, natural disaster. We talk about climate change. Bangladesh is one of the most impacted in the world in terms of climate change. Floods, cyclone, earthquake, etc. You always know about that, yeah, right? It's a victim, it's a victim, and we always really about that. But what people forget about Bangladesh is that although they have 6 natural disasters on average every year, Bangladesh still have a GDP up to 6%. In terms of education, they have been achieving more than 30 million students at school, at the primary level and at secondary level, with less than 10 years. Still forget that. And we forget that as well. 2 years back, it was like a shock, a revolution in the West. People of one of the poorest and most vulnerable and yet resilient and innovative country transform it from being the world's most famously vulnerable country. We recognize as perhaps the most adaptive country in the world. It is the most adaptive country in the world. So where are the lessons learned? That we might have been missing, where are knowledge? And where is knowledge right now? Not inside the book. Where is knowledge right now is with those people. It's to try to understand what makes people resilient, what makes people develop one. And unfortunately, and thanks God for me, because I'm very bad into mathematics, quantitative method will not be enough. We need to rethink about our qualitative method. We need to think about what is right now the indicator when we think about the developed one and non-developed one. And until we have this matrix of evaluation, this set of indicators, we will never be able to say that, well, Rio Plus 20 is going to be starting now or not. And many of you might have heard already, but when Ban Ki-moon have been saying, all the respect for Ban Ki-moon as well, but when he was saying, like, development is starting now, wait, development always started, it never ended. There is not as such a time frame that is just related to any kind of policymaker or all. It's a process. The problem of the knowledge right now, or scholars, or people researching about it, is that we might have been missing one of the train when we try to understand what is sustainable development. So when I'm talking about noble lie and this new vision, this new slogan that we have, please keep it in mind that it's not as such a lie. It's more that we have no more frame of thinking what is happening right now in our world. And that is the sad part of the story. So, thank you.
Again, thank you, Retana, for this very, very interesting illustrated contribution speech. I mean, now it's time for debate, and obviously it will be an intense one. Just to mention, in all that I heard there, the topic, you know, that is very focused on, you know, in this center, and it is that it's difficult to try to reach at the same time spatial equity and intergenerational equity. And doing so, I'm trying to arbitrate between different options. Sometimes we can make things really wrong, no? And especially forgetting that the people in front of us are really people with their own culture and development standards, can be different from ours. Yes, and I thank you for showing this noble lie out there, and I'm quite sure it will be a very sharp debate now. Okay, who wants to begin?
Thanks a lot. I really enjoyed that. I think one point, I think it's very important is that you did it most of the time, except on one slide you talked about growth, when in fact we're really talking about development from a sustainability point of view. Development and growth economically can be compatible, but very often have not been compatible. The other point that I'd like to make, again, I don't know whether it's a question, that you pointed out that the importance of children, because they're in a sense, the future of a territory, of a country. And I would say that basically, when I go into a community, a public consultation meeting, and I don't see any teenagers there, I know there's a problem. You know, if I don't see any 14, 15, 16, 17-year-olds, they've got a real problem on their hands in terms of communication. Just as I go if I went into a group representing a community and I don't see any women, and that still happens in Canada, I'd say, boy, you do have a problem. Okay. So one of the things I guess I'll be saying something similar is, you mentioned capacity building, and capacity building can deal with all sorts of different components of our lives, our society. And I guess the thing is that very often we look to so-called leaders to help build capacity of others, when in fact it's frequently the so-called leaders, like the people that, even at the local community level, although they're generally much better equipped than people higher up the hierarchy, politicians, many of the top level civil servants, and on it goes. They're talking about building capacity for people at the lower level, but they're the ones that need their capacity built as much as, if not more so, than others. Could you make any comments on that? Am I wrong?
No. And I think like you're very right. And again, like when we're coming in conference, it's always outside the conference that we discuss all of those hot topics as well. And because I got the sense as well yesterday that we were pretty much like on the same line. And definitely it's about inclusive and participative debate. And we need this train about raising awareness. We're not raising awareness in the right way, because somehow we excluded like the youth, somehow we excluded as well like some women, depending about the context once again. if I would like to comment again, is knowledge is not a unique sense. Knowledge is always a two sense, and it's where like the experts somehow lost a kind of sense of their epistemology and why they were there. When I'm in actually like in Bangladesh, what I'm also always saying is that when I'm in the field is where I am. Why? Because I'm being a sponge. I'm listening. I'm capable like to hear new knowledge that are traditional. The only thing that I'm doing, or that my research team or whatsoever are doing there, is simply being a facilitator or moderator of those knowledge in a way that could be articulated and spread around. That is nothing more than what we're doing. And until we are capable to be able to understand what we have in front of us and wanted to portray that in a way that it's going to be full of respect, as François Monseau said, like we are deeply in a failure of our system of thinking and knowledge.
Somebody else? Yeah. I would like you to comment on specificities of solidarity movements or solidarity in the economy. Obviously, there is the Grameen Bank initiative, but I think what I've seen in extremely poor areas in Africa, where in a certain way there naturally appeared forms of solidarity of commonly or jointly facing key issues. You find this very often when you have disasters and the kind. What kind of a culture of solidarity is there in the building?
But I'm taking example like in different countries where have been so many like emergency crisis conflict area in Africa, and especially like on Africa, otherwise like South Asia. What I saw and if there is any kind of NGO worker, it doesn't mean that I don't like NGO at all, but the solidarity system as such, before the intrusion of any kind of professional help, was much more powerful. And now we have the system of a kind of umbrella, where now the beneficiary is going to be a professional beneficiary, and where the solidarity value that they used to have among a locality, a village, among a family, is not anymore there, because there is not anymore like just another stakeholders being like the government as such, but you have as well multiple NGOs. And I'm talking about Bangladesh. We have 23,000 NGOs working there. It's as much as the enterprise there. And all of them supposed to be in the same time developing a country, but in the same time being apolitical. Like they're not supposed to be involving into advocacy. And that is where I think that we are reducing the space of solidarity the more we are putting action and injection of what we think good faith of solidarity as such at the international level. Is it responding to
I've lived in rice production, traditional rice production. You don't produce rice by yourself. Just the water that runs for one runs for the other, and that's it, etc. I'm less interested in the NGO, but is there a way? Is there a path? Let's say in reinforcing traditional solidarity systems. I understand what I mean.
Yes.
The grassroots really.
But I think like people know how to do that very well, and the only stuff is that they easily forget about what was the tradition before. And I think it's really about how we intervene into a society that used to be kind of not so linked with the other, and how they can keep their own identity and their own system of value and solidarity. Adding new stakeholders, adding new media and all of those is making like the whole process about keeping this solidarity or strengthening this kind of solidarity a very difficult exercise in this kind of open society where we are living right now. That's what's more.
Some other question? Oh, yeah.
Thank you. You have a question?
Well, thanks a lot for this very inspiring presentation. And reflecting upon noble lives, I think it's very important. But also, I think, echoing a little bit Al Gore's movie, it's sometimes also important to speak about inconvenient truths. Because there are some things out there that make at least me think, and I don't know about you, but don't you find it somehow, from your perspective, somehow an inconvenient truth that at the same time as all this that you're mentioning is happening, at the same time there are hundreds of millions of Chinese getting out of poverty, hundreds of millions of Indians getting out of poverty. The inconvenient truth of the fact that actually Africa is the success story of the 2000s and early 2010s. Africa is massively getting out of poverty. And actually what we see is, on the flip side, the missing growth, and here I speak really in terms of economic growth, comes from the West, comes from North America, comes from Europe, which is experiencing crisis. But the part of the world which is not facing crisis is precisely the developing world. So how do you interpret this inconvenient truth? And I would like to also comment on the fact that the videos that you showed are, yes, they make you think, well, people probably are not focusing so much on Rio +20. But on the other hand, it's an inconvenient truth, the fact that probably it's good, that there's something good behind the fact that they're not focusing so much on Rio +20, that youth is not focusing so much on that. Because it means, perhaps, it's just a provocation, that they actually, that pressure that we as scholars, as some politicians see, perhaps is not felt by the youth, but perhaps is not felt by these hundreds of millions of people that are getting out of poverty. And that the meaning of getting out of poverty, the meaning of development for them is actually the freedom to be able to watch YouTube, to be able to spend their time the way they want. And honestly, I have a deep respect for youth, for entrepreneurs that decide of investing their time in a meaningful manner, of avoiding just to participate in political process for the sake of it, and try to participate meaningfully into our society. And I know lots of youth, lots of entrepreneurs that instead of like 20,000 people going to Rio, participating in the conference and having at the end of the day not very much impact, they preferred investing their resources, their time in developing new technologies that are more energy efficient, to develop products that they can contribute, that others may find interesting and therefore buying. And so developing and that's what the buzzword that everyone is speaking about, developing a true green economy, so true innovation, through meaningful participation of youth and engineers. I have great respect for that, and I think that it's very important to look at these noble lives and criticize them is fundamental, but also to encourage youth and entrepreneurs into developing a more sustainable world their way as well.
Thank you. I was scared that you will actually discuss about the Asian Development Bank. But let's come back to the first point. And yes, I agree in terms of data. If we think about quantity, yeah. In Asia, well, but we represent 60% of the total population in the world. So it's very easy to have much more higher number. The same for Africa. We're all looking to a scale. And the scale is very different from developing country to emerging country and all of those. So again, when we think about world, when we think about data, number, we have to be extremely careful by that. Because what we hide by the quantity, by those kind of statistics, is actually the quality of the process. And when we think about how people have been developing, for example, in Bangladesh or in India, I might ask as well, is it that sustainable? Those influx of money coming from outside the country. Second point, when you're thinking about the youth, well, and I know that you try to provoke me, and I'm extremely sorry because I got my conscience very quickly about what was political and not. But the youth are searching themselves. And one good example is that, again, Google. Every month, there is like 31 billion search on Google, questioning from all different type of people. Many youth, they're the one like using actually internet. Why are they not asking that to the government? Why they're not asking that to institutions? What does it mean that there is this energy that we're not using? And I'm coming again to Montaigne, and we have been like saying that already yesterday, but science sans conscience n'est que ruine de l'âme. And I really think it's true. Because if we're not capable to raise value, what type of growth, what type of development are we going to see? And how are we going to manage that? Especially like when we think about planning it. If there is not an end goal, a common goal, I guess like it's not going to work like this.
Last question.
Thank you very much. I'm thinking how I can say what I want going to say without being negative, but I watched the presentation, and this idea that I'm going to share kept coming back to my mind. I used to be like you. This is not an offense, of course. I speak with utmost respect. Not very beautiful, thank you. I used to be like you, very passionate and critical about this view of the world, this cosmovision, if I may say that you have, and I respect it. And then I decided to accept an invitation. I come from South America, to join a government as a technical person or so on, right? And when I finished my experience working for that government 2.5 years later, I stopped doing what I used to do. Because of two reasons, and again with utmost respect. Now I work with the United Nations, I say in the morning. One is that it's easier to criticize than to do, and I heard this from someone, and I couldn't argue back, because I really wanted to argue back. I said, no, it's not like that. I know it's because of this and because of that. Once you go and sit down in the chair of the decision maker, with all the challenges, limitations, these issues of governance, these issues of the framework in which you have to operate, the scarcity of resources in developing nations like mine, and so on, then you pause, you think, and you say, yes, indeed, and I echoing the previous speaker, the world has been improving somehow, but as you say, quantity is different from quality, so it depends on how you see it. This is the first comment. And the second one, after my experience there, now that I'm with the United Nations for a while now, is that the phrase in English, I guess, is perfect is enemy of good. And I do feel, and this is why we are having this rencontre, right? To have this type of exchanges, to, I don't use the word provoke, but to try to get the best out of you. Because if you are sitting in that chair, it's because you are good. And I really want to hear your reaction to what I'm saying. Perfect is enemy of good. Are we as bad as I get impression out of your presentation, or is there something good in this evolution that we're having in the last decades? Thank you.
Okay, all right. So, in 10 years' time, I do not see myself working for the UN. But one of the things, it's not about passion. And really, like, I have been like spending a lot of time like in the field, and it's really like the way I see myself in the future as well. Now, when you think all the time about when someone is trying to react, someone is trying to rethink, we usually like being put already in the side. In the past, it was because I was young and naive, and that people was thinking, oh, I'm full of energy. Now, because I'm based like in poor country, it's because I'm too close from the community and I cannot make my mind to be objective. But I don't think it's about that. I mean, if we human beings, if we really like political animal, this feeling is something that is our main energy when we have to think the world and when we think about sustainable development as well. Now the second thing, and again, really to provoke me about being perfect and the enemy of good and all of those. I won't say that the world right now is bad. I won't say it's perfect. I just think it's drastically changing in a way that for a mind, as a human mind, we are out of tool to think that through. I mean, no one will have think about internet. No one will have think about how mobile phone will be sending money like in the rest of the world, and how international remittance is one of the main sources of income in poor countries. We were incapable to see that. And what I'm really thinking about is not bad, wrong, or whatsoever. It's this area of uncertainty. Who is going to think about that? Because there is a moment where we have to build those kind of guidelines. And because they're not yet there, we have to really work all together to be able to express in a very articulate way what is actually the complexity of the world, of the changing world where we are living right now. And not thinking about the problem right now, but anticipate the one in 10 years coming, in 20 years coming. And the example of climate change is really one of the best ones when we have to get this exercise going.
Okay. Thank you. Just the microphone anywhere.